Hello, welcome to this next tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be having a look at texturing in Marvelous Designer with a mind that we're going to export this to another application. Now I say that because MD is meant for the kind of 3D industry people like yourself and me and a whole bunch of other people, and MD does a very good job of rendering the textures in MD itself, but when you export they don't look so good. So what I'm going to do is go through some of the considerations, that we can apply to make it look better in an external application. So let's load in our garment. So I've got the GA avatar. I made the skirt for GA, so let's just minimize that. You couldn't see that, that's my recording overlay. So I've provided the file, the garment file, in my Ko-Fi shop for for free. So you can go download that and follow along. And I suggest you unzip that into your garment directory. So if you don't know where that is in your libraries, if you right click next to garment or on garment, you can copy the file path, and then you can open File Explorer and paste that path in there, and it will take you straight there. So unzip it into there, and then you might need to just reopen that folder to get it to recognize new files. And then we've got the UV skirt down here, and we can right click and add to workspace. There we go, now we've got the skirt. So it's a very simple skirt, consists of 3 pieces. And the first thing I do, because a lot of the problem is down to the amount of texture space you have externally. MD doesn't really care about it. It seems to adjust it. It's got its own way of doing it. So just to assess that, we're going to go to the UV editor, and then with nothing selected, I'm going to right click and then reset UV to 2D arrangement. And that's because, as you see, it's only showing 2 pieces, and I know there's 3 here. It just means one's overlapped. So with that done, then I select all my pieces and right click and fit to 0, 1, and then click OK. So that's fitted them in and shows me the amount of UV space that is taken up by the the UV. So I'm missing out on all of this lovely texture space up here, and that's because these 2 panels here are long, and what it's doing is say, well, I need to fit this in either horizontally or vertically, and that means I'm going to lose about 2/3 maybe of my space. So I want to change that, and to do that I need to reset or redo my pattern a little bit. So let's just reset that to the 2D view. There we go. So I want to cut this in half, but I've made it as I would normally make a whole bunch of other skirts, as I've made skirts 100 times. But I need to cut this, and I want the seams to be at the side, because it makes sense for me that the seam would be at the side, not front or back. Maybe at back if there was only one, but for texturing reasons, I want there to be 2 pieces, and I want there to be 2 seams, one on one side and one on the other. So that means I need to split this into pieces. So what we'll do is I'm going to go to the edit pattern. I'm going to select these 2 lines and then accidentally move them and wait for it to catch up with me. There we go. They moved the same, so it's not going to be a problem. And then right click, offset along the curve. There we go. And I want to, is that going to let me move it? Yes. I want to split this into 4 pieces. So I'm just going to increase that to 3. And now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. And I can click OK. And I want to do the same for this bottom one here. So I'll just do the same. Oh dear. It's terribly fiddly when you're doing it from a distance. There we go, let's get in closer and right click. Oops, I need both ends. Sorry, my brain is obviously not working well in the heat today. So right click, offset log curve, 1, 2, 3, and OK. Okay, so I want to split this into 3 pieces, a small one on the end, or a small one on each end, and I'm going to leave these two together. In fact, I don't need this line. I'm just going to delete it. I've just put it there so that I can get the right cuts on the sides, and if you look at the 3D view, we can see the right cuts are on the sides. So what I want to do initially is simply right click on these 2 lines and cut and sew. So that's put me 2 seams in, one either side. Yep, but I've still got one on the back. So if I select these 2 lines and right click and merge, I'll lose my seam on the back. There we go. And I can do the same for our bottom trim piece. So I'll delete that piece. Probably select these 2 at the same time and cut and sew. And I'll select both my ends, right click and merge. And now when we go to our UV, you'll see it's split everything up and it's partially rearranged it, but it's all a bit out of kilter. So I'm going to right click and reset to 2D arrangement. I'm going to move that over a little bit, there we go, and select all of that and right click and fit 01. So it's not going to pack for you. That's, you know, one of the annoying things about this. So we are going to have to just move these around a bit until we get a better fill. So just stack them like that and then fit 01, and now you can see they got much bigger, so they're going to take up more of my UV space. So previously, to get good resolution, I might have had to use a 4096 texture just to get the sort of same resolution I would out of a 2048 if I did it like this. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, of course, ask me below. But in the next section, what we're going to do is we're going to start to look at applying textures and seeing what we can do to make it look great. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so we're going to just hide this window here by clicking down on the one window view, because we don't really need that for the moment. So if we go to our substances here, you get a bunch of substances with Marvelous Designer. I'm guessing they've done some sort of deal with them, and we can apply these to our garment. We're not restricted to these substances, we can use other ones, and I'll show you how to do that a little later. But I just want to, show you the general usage of a substance. So say for example I want a kind of a relatively plain skirt here. I might use this double rib stitch SBSAR. SBSAR is just like a suffix for a substance archive, and you can make your own substances for this using Substance Designer, or we can use substance archives from Substance Painter. So let's just apply this, and if I drag and drop this over onto the skirt, you'll see that will apply to everything that's got the same material as the skirt. It's replaced it over here. I've got an extra fabric up here. Let me just click delete unused so that it's clear. Now you'll notice mine's gone a bit strange now, and that's because it's got an opacity channel to it. If I click on this preview here to make the better preview, you'll see it goes away, but it can be annoying, I know. So what we do first is in the properties for that material, we can go to the channels and just turn off opacity. I don't think I'm going to export it. I just want the basic pattern. There we go. So that looks pretty good, but we can have a look under custom properties, and here we have sort of the power of substance that we use here. All the parameters that have been set up that we can adjust to change our substance look. So we have a yarn colour, for example, so we can click on that and we can click a completely different green, for example, or a completely different colour. You can pick whatever colour you like. I'm having a bit of a brain moment here, so yeah, I'm going to go blue, something like that one I think, and then click OK, and then I can zoom out, have a look. Looks okay. We also have random seed. Now a lot of substances have a random seed, and they're just about sort of regenerating a substance with a little variation to them. So if we zoom in close and I increase my random seed, we should see there are some slight changes, and I can see some very slight changes happening. They're not very strong in this one, but they are happening. I think they're mostly down to the underlying bump and the kind of noise that we're getting in our stripes, which is not very visible, which is terrific because that makes it really easy to demonstrate. But yeah, be aware that it's there. Also, what do we have? Let me select the rib stitch again, custom properties. We have a roughness, we have colour, and we have how metallic it should be. So if I increase this to metallic, set it to 1, you'll see it becomes much kind of more reflective. If I go into the main, you might see it a little bit better. That looks like a very metallic sort of material. And if I turn that down, of course, to half or to 0, that will remove that out, and we can change the roughness here, and if I put the roughness up to 1, it becomes very dull and non-reflective, and if I move it down, you'll see it becomes very plasticky and shiny. And if I combine that with the metallic, we get very metallic. So just be aware that underneath all of these substances, you do have things to change, which can, change the look of your material. If you've used Substance, you'll know that it has all sorts of functions for picking up edges and shading curvature and putting ambient occlusion in. I don't believe that's going to be functional here, simply because you're not going to be able to bake the maps that enable that functionality to work. But you still can use substances and you can still get some good results out of them. There we go. Okay, so with that said, I've adjusted that to look quite reasonably nice, I think, and what I want to do now is the waistband. So rather than drone on and bore you terribly with very long sections, I'm going to cut this one short here, and when we come back we're going to put like a waistband texture on to get that done. Okay, so I will talk to you then. Okay, so let's use one of these for the waistband, and I think I'm going to use this polyester because it's got kind of a nice stretch look to it, like a stretchy elastic kind of thing. I know it's bright green, but we can change that. So if I drag and drop that onto the waistband, and we can go and have a look at it. There we go. This one I think is not scaled right. I think I need to scale it down a bit. So selecting that, we'll go to transform and then lock aspect ratio, and essentially to make it smaller I need this to be a smaller number, so I'm going to go down to 75 for that. Because I've got lock aspect on, it's doing them both at the same time, and that looks okay. So that's my transform. It's custom properties. I'm going to want like a variation on this blue, so if I click on this green colour and then click on this little eyedropper, I can click into my skirt and it should pick something close. It takes a moment, I don't know why, but yeah, it takes a moment. So let's click OK on that. I can see there's a transparency to it, so we can go to our channels and turn that off. There we go. And now we've got a nice little waistband. You can of course, you know, change that in other ways. You can darken it, you could do all sorts of things, but for the moment I think that's all I'm going to do. I could have tacked that onto the other one really, couldn't I? That was easy. Okay, so what else can we put in this bit to make it less short? So another sort of consideration here is, well, do I want my trim piece to be different? Do I want a design on it? Would I like it to be a different colour? Well, we can either make a new material or we can use some other tools within MD to do that. So if I make another material, that's going to be a whole nother set of maps, and you know, the more sets of maps I've got, the more awkward it's going to be when I'm outside of MD. So what I'm going to do is put a little design on this without actually adding a new material. So we'll do that in the next one, because I think that will be quite a long one. So I'll talk to you then. Right, so let's put some trim around the bottom of this skirt then. So if I just split my window again, let's go to the 2-window view. I'm going to change this back to the 2D editor. So because these two strips are separate from each other, I have to do this twice, but that's not too bad. I'm going to have an extra seam, but I'm going to emphasize that it's a seam, so that, you know, expecting them to match up is, you know, not reasonable, if that makes sense. So let's do this. So first of all, in the 2D pattern window, we go to graphic pattern, and I have some patterns that I bought in a texture set many moons ago, Cloth Text Volume 3, and we can pick one of these and add it to our texture. So what should we pick? I think we'll pick perhaps this one, and then I click on the pattern I want to add it to, and then we have a scaling here. You'll see that the scale isn't quite right, it's not quite there, so let's just update that. I want it to be a little higher. Let's try 40. 40 is too much. Let's try 36. Yeah, that might work. And then click OK. And now I can just maneuver this into place. There we go. So it's nearly tall enough. I'm going to leave it as it is, because, you know, I want it to be, you know, I don't want it to be too far out of my scope. If you do want to change it, click on the pattern. You'll get a little circle on the inside, and at the kind of 45-degree angles on those circles, little arrows, and they're the scaling arrows. So if you did want to increase it, you could just grab that little scaling arrow and move it up until it's right. Yeah, I wasn't going to do it, but I've already done it, so hey, there you go. I've got a little bit on the bottom there. I'm just going to move that down. There we go. So I've got a tiny sliver at the top. Now this is all very well, but it's kind of the wrong colour. Let's look at the skirt, and it's on the wrong side at the moment. So what we want to do is colorise it and tile it. So to colorise it, I just go to colour, and I'm going to use my eyedropper. I'm going to eyedropper onto there. It will feel like it's not working, and then it will work, and then click OK. And now I've colorised it with the blue. And now to make it tile, I want to go down to the graphic config and switch that to X-axis, and now it will tile across the back. So I want to know how big this is now, so let's just go up to our texture and look under the transforms, and it's 114.7. Yeah, these don't seem quite right. The width is definitely not right, and the height isn't right. It doesn't look right anyway. So let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can eyeball it. Okay, so I need to repeat that on the front. Actually, Now that's ridiculous. All I need to do is grab this front piece and delete it, and then I'm just going to copy and paste and then resew it in. So if I just select that piece and shift and F, oops, not in that mode, yeah, shift and F to get the arrangement points up. I had it in the proper render mode and they won't appear there, so you just have to do it, you know, switch to the normal mode. So let's pop that there and shift F to turn off the arrangement points, and then I'll move that down and then we'll just sew it up. So segment sewing, that one to that one. Not segment sewing because we've got a point in there. Let's just delete these 2 points. Just select those 2. Oh, come on. Just want to select these 2 points and delete them. And then I'll sew it up. There we go. There to there. And we'll do the sides. There to there. And then we'll do this side. There to there. Let's sim again. There we go. And it even adds up on the seam. Look, it must be one of those miracle textures that just happens to tile properly into, you know, the size of my pattern. Depending on the size of your pattern and the aspect ratio of your image, it may tile or it may not. But because of the seams and because I'm going to emphasize the seams, it doesn't, you know, matter quite so much. Okay, so that's putting a graphic on there. You have other options. If we go back to graphic options, here we go, just so I can select the graphic. So there is a space for, let's just collapse that down, so you can add a normal map and a displacement map and opacity maps. So, you know, you could, if you had a lace texture, for example, you know, you could use that lace texture as your opacity map and as your color map, so you would get that, like that, you know, get the transparent look through the holes. You know, we have reflectiveness and all sorts of other things that we could use to, you know, add shine differences. So yeah, experiment. But just be aware that when you bring an image in, if you resize it and then try and use the same image on all of the other channels, you have to resize it to the same size, otherwise they won't line up. I hope that makes sense. So if you have a lace map and you have to scale it to get it to fit, and then you use the same map with the same dimensions as the opacity, you need to scale it, otherwise it's just, you know, going to look crazy. Okay, so that's a quick graphic, and I've been rattling on about emphasizing the seams, and that's something we're going to do in the next section, so I'll talk to you then. Okay, so emphasizing seams. Marvelous Designer does a really good job of showing them. If we go into the rendered view and also switch to the thick textured surface, we should start seeing where the seams are, because they're really quite, you know, visible. Not in this case because I've got texture over the top of it, but if I switch to a monochrome surface, we can see. So it puts a normal map in wherever there's a seam. So we can see that, you know, where seams are interacting, they're, you know, crossing over. And if we go into our UV editor and click this little thing here and go to the normal map, you don't actually have to click in it, you can just see. If you zoom in, you can see what it's doing to the normal map. So it's adding there, and it's also picking up normal details from the underlying substance, which is brilliant. So what I want to do is emphasize these seams, and for that I'm going to need to go to the 2D pattern view and go to edit seam, edit sewing, and when I select a seam, we've got a fold strength, a fold angle, and we've got an intensity and a thickness. Now bearing in mind I've no idea where I've selected, it's this side. Okay, so if we select this seam, we can manipulate it and it should show up here. So if I set my thickness to say 5, it'll have a think about it, and when it comes back we'll get a thicker seam. So it's going to show up more in our you know, in our external application. And I often find that, you know, exaggerating a bit gives you a bit of a better look, not because, you know, it's real, but because, you know, in 3D sometimes things are difficult to see, and over exaggerating something gives you you know, a little bit of extra. So what we want to do is, for each of our seams, we want to update them. So let's put all of these to say 5, and on our waistband we'll set that to 5 as well, and this one we'll set that to 5. Basically all the ones that I really want to show up. We've got 2 down there, so we'll set that to 5, and that one to 5, and this one here to 5. I'm going to do my little trims down here as well, so we'll set that to 5, and this one also. So we can see all of our seams are much thicker now. They're giving our cloth a thickness, but what we don't have is anything down the bottom, and for that we need to kind of fake it. So to do that, what I'm going to do, well, I'm not going to fake it, I'm going to create some pattern pieces which we're not actually going to export. So if I select these two and copy and paste and just move them down a little bit, I'm never going to do anything with these except sew them. So what we'll do is use our segment sew to sew back to these, and now we have got something which we can create a seam from. So back to our edit sewing, and I select each of my new seams and set those to 5, and same on the other one, set that to 5 as well, and now we've got some thick seams. So for these two I'm just going to right click and hide those patterns, and now we can see that we've got that there. We've got a similar issue on the waistband, so it looks thick down here, but up here it looks, you know, thin. So let's take a copy of this one, so copy and paste, pop it up there, we'll sew it back. I'll use free sewing on this one because I think I've got a point in the middle. There we go. I'm going to move this a little closer so it doesn't build up too much momentum and then move things around too much. So let's sim, there we go, and now I can edit my seam, there we go, and hide this piece. So now those, so that I know that, you know, these are the seams, or these are the pieces that I don't want to export, I'm going to move these away so that when I select these pieces, you know, I can use the export these pieces only and it will do the job. Now that top piece has pulled things away a little bit, so what I'm going to do is select this top piece of the top seam there, top, not seam, but top edge, and I'm just going to turn that elastic on and then just reduce that to say 95 for the ratio and let that sim. Is that the right line? Yeah, it's the right line. It's just not getting very close. Okay, if it's not getting very close, it usually means my avatar has got some distance on it. So my skin offset is 3, let's set that to 0. But don't forget the pattern also has an offset, and I'll set that to 0 just to see if it works, and then press space. There we go. I think the offset there is a little too extreme, so let's put that to 0.5. There we go, and we've lost our lost that horrible poke through that we definitely don't want. There we go. Right, let's go back to the shaded view, so thick textured surface, and now if I go in, we should actually, yes we can, we couldn't before, but now we can see our seams, and that's good. Okay, so that's essentially the basics of it. I might I might do one or two things just before I export, but I think it's okay as it is. So in the next video, what we'll do, or the next section of the video, what we'll do is we're going to have a look at our UV again, and then we're going to export. But actually I've missed the stitches because I'm an idiot. So the next video I'll do the stitches, and then we'll prep for export. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so stitching is fairly straightforward. We're in the 2D pattern window here, and what we'll do is put stitching in various places to, you know, emphasize realism, etc. So on the stitch tools up here, we can go either segment, free, or seam line. So we're going to go segment for our first couple. So I want to put a set of stitches on the top and the bottom of our waistband piece. So if I click the top, you'll see it's popped in some stitches, and if I click the bottom, it'll add stitches into there as well. Now over here, I can change this window to top stitch, and then it gives me some options. So first of all, this is the default. It's going to give me an offset of 3.2mm. It's an OBJ. I can switch that to texture, and that gives me a textured version, which is interesting. We're not going to export the stitches because they would be massive. They would be huge, and you know, we don't want that. We don't want that extra geometry. So what do we want to do here? Well, because they're going to be very, very small, I want to increase their size a little bit. So let's make that 3.2 instead, and hope that's not too much. And 0.4 for our thickness, just to emphasize them a little bit. When we export this, we're not going to get that sort of detail, but you know, we're going to have a look, see what we can do. The colour's probably wrong as well, so let's put that to our original. That's a little blend, it's blending in a little too much, so I'm going to make it a little darker just to give it some sort of emphasis, and then click OK. We also have our stitch shapes. So this one says custom because I've changed it. But we have bar tacks, buttonholes, overlocks, pick stitches, single and zigzag. So you can change, you know, according to your according to what you want. There we go. So the default top stitch is going to go wherever I put a top stitch. So if I now pop a top stitch down the side here, which is almost certainly the other side. No? Is it just I can't see it? Yeah, there we go. Zoom in. There we go. We've got a stitch there, and I'll put one on the other side as well. You could sew both sides of this, I guess. So you'd have stitches up either side of our seam here. Has that done it? Should have done it. They're all done. There we go. Yeah, that's good. So now we've further emphasised our, sorry about the motorcycle noises. People do enjoy themselves on a Sunday, it's very inconvenient. So we've further emphasised our seams by popping some stitches in, and of course you could do much more contrasted colours if you wanted to, but I'm not much of a designer, so I'm sticking with a similar. So I've just put stitches round our bottom here, so on our trim, and again I'm going to put it at the sides here to emphasize that this is a seam, and you know, the edge doesn't need to tile. It's a seam. It's two different pieces of fabric, you know, sewn together. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily expect those to be completely tiled. Okay, so that's the stitches. I hope you found that useful. In the next one, we're going to start to prep for export, and we're going to have a think about, you know, texture space. We might move some things around, and you know, see where we go from there. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so exporting this, I'm going to go to the UV editor first, because no matter what I do, I am going to need to export my textures from the UV editor, so I need to be in here anyway. So let's see what we've got here. Well, we've split our pattern. This needs rearranging, so let me just right click and reset that. There we go. Now I need to rearrange these pieces. Sorry, I missed that earlier in the video. There we go. So some of these pieces are absolutely not necessary. So let's go to our 2D pattern window and select the unnecessary ones, and then back to UV editor, and got those selected now, and I can move those away. Don't need them, don't want them anywhere near it. There we go. So these I want to move close together, but not, you know, dead on each other, because, you know, I need some space between the two for to allow for UV bleeding. And then I'm going to select these two and move them on top of each other, or near each other. And the less space I have between these, the better, because the more texture space I'll get if they're close. Not that close, that's too close. I need bleeding space. There we go. And then I'll select them all, right click and fit to 0 and 1, and then OK. Now I'm going to get two images out of this, because if we go to our fabric, we've got our main skirt, and then we've got our honeycomb mesh here, which is our waistband. Now the waistband isn't going to benefit much from having its own texture, but I am going to get more space here. So I'm going to move this over to this other UV spot, this UV square, because I'm going to give it its own texture space. And then if I reselect these and right click and fit 0 to 1, I'm going to get even more space out of it, so that's perfect. So the waistband's not going to get anything else out of it because it fits the entire width. I could split it into two or more pieces maybe, but I'm not going to, mostly because it will just take up more time in the video, and you know, you've seen enough of me splitting things. And even if I did split it, I still would have it in its own UV space. If you want to move between UV tiles, you can just use the left and right and even up and down arrow keys on your keyboard, and it will move from one spot to another. There we go. So now I've got the absolute most out of these I can get, short of really pushing these close together. You know, it has no you know, pack options like other 3D programs do. Hopefully it will in the future, but you know, it's a bit time consuming otherwise, you know, to rearrange things and resize them, and you know, spend all your time doing that, especially if you have a really complex pattern. So yeah, there we go. So now that I've done that, I might decide that I need a little bit more geometry out of this. They're a little crinkled at the top. Yeah, perhaps a little more. The waist and the trim are okay, so if I select those two, they're at 10 currently. I'll maybe take those down to 8. and hopefully I'll get a little bit more out of the top, a bit less crinkly. Yeah, that relaxed a bit. Good. Okay, so once you've done all that, we'll go to the 2D view. We'll select the pieces that we want with the edit tool there. So we'll select those, and then it's a file, export, OBJ selected, so we exclude our extra bits. I can't delete them because it would take the seam lines away, so we have to do it this way. And then I'll create a new file. I'll call it UV skirt. There we go. Oops, all in capitals. I have a tendency to turn my caps lock on without noticing. There we go. And UV skirt textured. There we go. Save that out. It's going to ask us our options. So on all patterns, that's all patterns that I have selected, not all patterns. So single object, thin, I don't want thick, and once I've done that I want this to be welded. I want unified UV coordinates because, you know, that will give me the right UV spaces. Your scale depends where you're going. I'll stick with DAZ Studio because that's where I think I'll demo the texture, and everything else is fine. So click OK on that, and it's going to export. And then in the UV editor, it's now use this little. Okay, you may notice a slight break here as I cut video and I've done this separately because my brain had a massive meltdown and it all went horribly wrong. So we're going to do the export of textures now. So first of all, I'm going to go to the UV editor. There we go. And for these bits down here, I need those to be at least in one square. So I'm just going to pop them into the waistband square. It's going to put some textures on them, but yeah, I don't. It's not something that's going to concern me. If you wanted to put them onto another one, just select them all and use the left or right button and put it on its own texture, and then you can delete it. In fact, oh yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. And the reason I'm doing that is because I can't delete them because then I'll lose my lovely normal seams. But you know, when we're exporting, it's a little bit unclear. So to export, if we go to this little Bake Textures button, we can click a path. You'll see this is where I managed to really mess up earlier, and put in a name. So I'm going to make it UV skirt, and click off and click save. I'm going to bank them as 4096. Now it depends on the character you're working for. If you're working for a character that's got a 1024 texture, then do them at 1024. You want to match the look. You know, if the character is quite, you know, low res and it hasn't got super lot of detail, it's going to be weird if the clothes have got loads of detail. Similarly, you know, if it's 2048, if it's 4096, then match it. You know, you can't do much better than that, really. So 4096, this is where my brain went wrong. These extra bits add a tile, and I couldn't figure out exactly which way this worked to export the individuals, so I'm going for all tiles, and I'm just using diffuse, normal and roughness. So I've unticked metalness and opacity and displacement so that, you know, I only get a few files. Now before I actually export those, I'm going to delete all these because they're just going to make my life difficult otherwise. There we go, let's delete those. It will overwrite them, but it will also leave the ones that, you know, I don't want, so I just want it to be clear. So with that done, we can hit the save button. and it's now going to go and calculate the textures, build the image maps and export them to that directory. If we're going to have a look in that directory, we should see them as they go. So you can see we've got our colour maps and the one we don't want, we've got our normal maps, and we've got our roughness maps. So I can close that there, and then I'm just going to come in here and delete the ones that are not needed. There we go. So we could do that in the in the pattern export by simply not selecting them, but here we needed to be a bit more creative. Okay, so the last thing in this then will be to set these up in something else and have a look at them. So I'm going to do that between videos and then come back and show you what it looks like. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so I've popped it into Studio and had a look, set up the textures, and this is essentially what we get, and it looks quite nice. But I want to show you what it looks like without the process. So if I actually find where the skirt is, I'll right click and select, there we go, and we've got our materials here. And the main thing is, the normal map. Sorry, brain went off then. So if I slide down this list here, we should find the normal map, and I can set that back to 0. I'll do the same for the other one. There we go, and that's what it looks like. So we're losing quite a lot of the definition of the skirt. We're losing kind of the thickness and the seams coming together and really kind of popping. So if I actually select both of these, I can turn the normal back to 1, and there we go. It might be a little too defined, maybe. If I zoom in a little bit and just go and have a look, we can see there we've got the stitches either side, they're helping us, and we've got that little darkness in between. I might actually think I might have overdone them. So if I dial back the normal map, we should get to somewhere about right. So I hope you found that generally useful. You can do normal maps and some effect maps out of Marvelous Designer using Substance, and it makes a difference. You have to UV map in Substance, of course, which is a little bit of a pest at the moment, but it's not too bad. Depends how many pattern pieces you've got and how many zones. But yeah, I hope you found that generally useful. So if you have any questions, as I said, ask below. Otherwise, I will talk to you in another video.